Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You know how they say the truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it? Well, let me tell you about the day my father's cruel words at a wedding turned into the moment that changed everything between us forever. My name is Sam, and at 56, I thought I had learned to live with disappointment. For decades, I had been my father's greatest shame and his most reliable safety net all at once. Arthur Vance, tech mogul and ruthless businessman, never missed an opportunity to remind me that I had thrown away my birthright when I chose military service over inheriting his empire. What he conveniently forgot to mention was how many times my skills had quietly saved his reputation and fortune. The relationship had always been complicated. Growing up as Arthur's only child meant living under the constant weight of his expectations and the crushing blow of his disapproval when I chose my own path. After serving as a Delta Force operative for 15 years, I had transitioned into private security consulting for high-profile clients. The work was lucrative and fulfilling, but in my father's eyes, I was nothing more than hired help for people like him. For years, I had swallowed his dismissive comments and public humiliations, telling myself that underneath it all, he loved me. I convinced myself that his harsh words were just his way of expressing disappointment, not genuine contempt. Every family gathering became an exercise in emotional endurance, where I would smile politely while he introduced me as his daughter, who had chosen to play soldier instead of taking over the family business. The pattern had become so familiar that I barely flinched anymore when he would make jokes about my career choices in front of his wealthy friends. I had learned to compartmentalize the hurt, to focus on the work I loved, and to hope that someday he would see the value in what I had accomplished. But hope, I discovered, can be a dangerous thing when it blinds you to reality. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday in March. Victoria Sterling, my father's fourth wife-to-be, was marrying him at an exclusive resort in Big Sur. The invitation was formal, impersonal, and felt more like a business announcement than a family celebration. Still, I cleared my schedule and prepared to attend, bringing along Leo, my young protege, for what I thought would be a routine family obligation. The resort was everything you would expect from my father's taste: ostentatious luxury wrapped in California coastal elegance. As I walked into the rehearsal dinner, dressed in my best but understated suit, I immediately felt the familiar sensation of being out of place in my father's world. The guests were the usual collection of tech executives, investors, and social climbers, all speaking in the coded language of wealth and influence. I found myself standing alone near the window, watching the sunset over the Pacific, when my father approached with Victoria on his arm. She was a striking woman in her 40s, with the kind of calculating smile that I had learned to recognize in my line of work. But it was what happened next that would replay in my mind for months to come. A prominent venture capitalist approached our small group, and my father immediately launched into what I initially thought would be a standard introduction. Instead, he clapped his hand on my shoulder with theatrical familiarity and announced loudly enough for half the room to hear, "This is Sam, my daughter." She had every opportunity to take over my empire, but instead she chose to play soldier. Now she works as a security guard for people like us. At least she's finally useful. The words hit me like a physical blow, not just because of their cruelty, but because of the way he delivered them with such casual satisfaction, as if my humiliation was entertainment for his guests. Victoria's soft laugh was the cherry on top of this public degradation, her amusement at my expense making it clear that this was not an accidental slight, but a deliberate performance. But something else was happening that night, something that my trained eye caught even as my heart was breaking. While my father was busy destroying my dignity, I was unconsciously doing what I did best: assessing threats and reading situations. Julian Sterling, Victoria's younger brother, was moving through the crowd with the kind of focused attention that raised red flags in my mind. Over the next hour, I watched Julian coordinate with several staff members who moved with military precision rather than the casual efficiency of resort employees. Their body language, their positioning, the way they communicated through subtle signals, all of it screamed danger to someone with my background. When I saw Julian pass a signal jamming device to one of these fake servers, followed by whispered words that I read on his lips as coordinating a timeline, I knew we were dealing with something far more serious than wedding festivities. The responsible thing would have been to alert resort security and let the professionals handle it. But the responsible thing would also have been to approach my father directly. So I did what any dutiful daughter would do. I swallowed my pride, found my father in a private moment, and tried to warn him about what I had observed. His reaction was everything I should have expected, and nothing I was prepared for. He looked at me with such complete disdain that I actually took a step backward. When I explained what I had seen, laying out the evidence as clearly and professionally as I could, he interrupted me with a harsh laugh. "Here we go again with your paranoid soldier fantasies," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Julian is family now, Sam. I know you've never liked Victoria. Probably because you're jealous that someone finally makes me happy. But I won't let you sabotage this wedding with your delusions." He paused, studying my face with cold calculation. "You know what your problem is? You've spent so many years looking for enemies that you can't recognize family when you see it." The conversation ended with him throwing a crystal tumbler against the wall, the sound of shattering glass punctuating his final words. "Get out of my sight, Sam. You're embarrassing yourself and me. If you can't be supportive, then stay away from the ceremony tomorrow." Standing there among the glittering shards, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. It was not just the rejection of my warning, though that stung. It was the realization that my father was so committed to his narrative about me that he would rather risk his life than admit I might be right about something important. The daughter who had spent her career protecting people was being dismissed as a paranoid embarrassment by the one person whose approval she had spent a lifetime seeking. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of retreating in hurt silence as I had done so many times before, I chose to act on my professional instincts, regardless of my father's opinion. I contacted Frank Miller, the resort's head of security, and laid out my concerns with the methodical precision that had kept me alive through multiple deployments. Frank, a former Marine who recognized competence when he saw it, immediately understood the gravity of what I was describing. Together, we spent the early morning hours of the wedding day reviewing security footage, mapping escape routes, and developing contingency plans. For the first time in years, I felt valued for my expertise, rather than ashamed of it. The attack came exactly as I had predicted. During the ceremony, as my father and Victoria were exchanging vows, the lights went out, and Julian's team revealed themselves. But this time, instead of being dismissed and sidelined, I was ready. Working with Frank and his legitimate security team, we moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency. The next few hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of violence and protection. Every skill I had honed over decades of service came into play as we neutralized threats, evacuated civilians, and ultimately exposed Victoria and Julian's plot to murder my father for his fortune. When the police arrived, they found not a security guard who had gotten lucky, but a seasoned professional who had prevented a massacre. The media attention was immediate and intense. Within hours, my military record, my consulting work, and my role in stopping what the press called the Wedding Day Massacre were front-page news across the country. Interview requests poured in from major networks, and my phone rang continuously with calls from former colleagues, clients, and total strangers who wanted to hear the story firsthand. But the call I was waiting for never came. My father, who had been released from the hospital after treatment for shock and minor injuries, said nothing to me directly. Instead, I learned from news reports that he was cooperating fully with the investigation and had publicly thanked the resort's security team for their quick response. My name was mentioned only in passing, identified simply as a family member with military training who assisted in the response. 3 weeks after the wedding, I finally received a message from my father. It was not an apology or an acknowledgement of what had happened. Instead, it was a formal letter from his attorney, informing me that he was restructuring his will and wanted to discuss my future role in the family business. The letter was cold, transactional, and completely devoid of any personal recognition of what I had done or what he had put me through. That letter became my moment of clarity. Sitting in my apartment, holding this latest attempt to control our relationship on his terms, I realized that I had been waiting my entire life for a father who simply did not exist. The man who had raised me was incapable of seeing me as anything other than a disappointment to be managed or an asset to be utilized. There was no amount of heroics, no level of achievement, no sacrifice great enough to earn the genuine love and respect I had been seeking. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I wrote my father a letter of my own. Not a plea for understanding or an attempt to explain my perspective, but a clear, professional communication setting boundaries for our future interactions. I thanked him for the opportunities my upbringing had provided, acknowledged the ways we had failed to understand each other, and informed him that I would no longer be available for family obligations that served only to diminish my sense of self-worth. I also declined his offer to join the family business. Instead, I used the media attention from the wedding incident to launch my own security consulting firm, specializing in executive protection for high-profile individuals and corporations. The irony was not lost on me that my father's public humiliation had inadvertently provided me with the best marketing I could have asked for. The response to my letter was swift and predictable. My father's assistant called within hours, informing me that he was disappointed by my decision and hoped I would reconsider. When I politely but firmly declined to discuss the matter further, the calls stopped. For the first time in my adult life, I was not waiting for my father's approval or dreading his disapproval. I was simply living my life according to my own values and priorities. Building my new business was both terrifying and exhilarating. Every client meeting felt like a validation of my professional worth. Every successful assignment, a reminder that my skills had value beyond my family connections. Leo joined me as a full partner, and together, we built a reputation for excellence that had nothing to do with my father's money or influence. The hardest part was not the work itself, but learning to trust my own judgment without the constant noise of family criticism. For months, I found myself second-guessing decisions I would have made without hesitation in my military days. The voice of doubt that sounded suspiciously like my father's dismissive tone took time to quiet, but gradually, I began to rediscover the confidence that had made me successful in the first place. 6 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. My father appeared without warning, looking older and less imposing than I remembered. He was not wearing one of his usual expensive suits, but rather a simple business casual outfit that made him seem almost human. He carried a bag from a local bakery and 2 cups of coffee, as if he were just another client stopping by for a consultation. We sat in my conference room for nearly 2 hours, and for the first time in my memory, he asked questions about my life without immediately offering criticism or advice. He wanted to know about my business, about the cases I was working on, about whether I was happy with the choices I had made. His interest seemed genuine, though I remained cautious about his motives. Near the end of our conversation, he finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I've been watching the news coverage of your work," he said, his voice unusually quiet. "Frank Miller told me that what you did at the wedding was one of the most impressive tactical responses he'd ever witnessed. I should have listened to you that night. Sam, I should have trusted your judgment." It was not exactly an apology, but it was acknowledgement, and that felt like progress. More importantly, it was validation from the person whose opinion had shaped so much of my self-perception for so many years. But what surprised me was that the validation, while nice to receive, was no longer essential to my sense of worth. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied carefully, "but I need you to understand that I'm not going to keep waiting for moments like this. I've built a life that I'm proud of, and I can't go back to measuring my success by your approval." He nodded slowly, and I could see him processing the shift in our dynamic. "I understand," he said finally, "and I respect that. I was wondering if maybe we could try again, on your terms this time. No expectations, no pressure about the business, just a father trying to get to know his daughter." The conversation ended with cautious optimism rather than dramatic reconciliation. We agreed to have lunch the following month, with the understanding that our relationship would need to be rebuilt from the ground up based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. It was a small step, but it felt honest in a way that our previous interactions never had. Today, 2 years after that terrible wedding day, I run a successful consulting firm that employs 12 people and has offices in 3 cities. My father and I have lunch once a month, conversations that focus on the present rather than relitigating the past. He has learned to ask about my work with genuine curiosity rather than condescending judgment, and I have learned to share my life with him without seeking his validation. The relationship is not perfect, and it may never be the close father-daughter bond that some part of me will always long for. But it is honest and respectful, built on the foundation of who we actually are, rather than who we thought we should be to each other. Most importantly, it no longer defines my sense of self-worth. The greatest gift of that horrible wedding day was not stopping a criminal plot or earning media recognition for my actions. It was the moment I realized that I could not wait any longer for someone else to see my value. I had to claim it for myself, set boundaries that protected it, and build a life that reflected it. Everything that followed grew from that single moment of choosing my own worth over someone else's approval. I still keep the newspaper clipping from the day after the wedding on my office wall. The headline reads, "Former Special Forces Operative Prevents Wedding Day Massacre," and the photo shows me escorting the last of the wedding guests to safety. Every time I look at it, I remember not just the professional triumph of that day, but the personal victory of finally seeing myself the way I deserved to be seen all along.